Oh, right, so I can literally start broadcasting. Good evening, hurrah, I'm Chris Grimes and this is History in the Making. This is me doing a first punt, first experiment. You saw it here first, live on YouTube and on Facebook. This is an experiment of how to start streaming the Good Listening To podcast live whilst I also do a recording of it. So I am sitting in a place called Keynsham, near Bristol, near Bath. You do the math, you can measure if you like, doesn't really matter. But I'm sitting on some cinema seats auctioned from Padstow Cinema, one that I happen to have walked past many, many times. Next to me is lucky number 26, please. But anyway, I'm just beginning to riff on the idea of how to experiment with going live with the Good Listening To show and podcast. So Spiralux are the wonderful people, Chris Horseman and Peter Turn It Off and On Again Larter. And I've got Ollie McConnell with me as well, who's going to be doing stills photographs and also being part of the squad to make this all happen. Now, the very exciting reason why I've decided to start doing YouTube lives as well, apart from growing the audience ship gradually of the podcast, is that in 2 weeks' time, yes, 2 weeks' time, today happens to be historically, I think it's the, now I've forgotten the date, is it the 20th today? What's the date today, please? It's the 21st, please, is the right answer. And on the 4th, no, the 5th, you got it right. This is live, we're experimenting. On the 5th of October, I'm going to do a brand new departure for the podcast, which is telling some founder stories. And I'm thrilled to say that I'm going to be in a very swanky Swiss restaurant in Bristol, in a place called Cargo. It's going to be Box E, that glorious restaurant that's in 2 containers within the Box E, within the Cargo area. And I'm going to be doing the founder story of the story behind the story of being Box E. And at the point when the desserts or the coffee or the wine, you choose, hits the table, I will then invite forth Tess and Elliot Lidston, and we'll be doing the story behind the story of being Box E. And we'll be doing it as a recorded podcast, but also streaming live to Facebook and YouTube at the same time. There is a dedicated Facebook group, obviously, for the Good Listening To show. And also thanks to Ollie McConnell, who's sitting just off to my left here, there is now a new YouTube channel as well. As to what the podcast is about already, if you've not heard it yet, where have you been? But it all takes place, it's called The Good Listening To, the story behind your story show. And it all takes place energetically in a clearing or a serious, happy place of my guest's choosing. And I called it The Good Listening To back in the day because I used to, I do coaching and I work as a facilitator, and I've always thought of coaching as about giving somebody a damn good listening to. So at the beginning of the pandemic, when work sort of stopped really, as everything sort of seemed to go off a bit of a cliff, as everything sort of contracted, I thought, well, what can I do and continue to do? So The Good Listening To was born. So yes, it all takes place energetically in the clearing, and then once my guest has told me where their serious, happy place is, all the stories then emanate from that centre point, if you like, energetically. So then I arrive with a tree in your clearing, and a bit waiting for Godot-esque. That's why I arrive a la Samuel Beckett with a tree, and I shake your tree to see how your storytelling apples fall out. And then there's a lovely juicy storytelling exercise, how do you like these apples, called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where my guest has had 5 minutes before we record together to have thought about 4 things that have shaped them, 3 things that inspire them, 2 things that never fail to grab their attention, and borrow from the film Up, that's a bit, oh, squirrels, what never fails to distract you or take you away from what you're currently focusing on. So what are your monsters or squirrels of distraction? And then finally, the 1 is a quirky or unusual fact about you we couldn't possibly know until you tell us. And then we stay in the clearing, move away from the tree, and next we talk about alchemy and gold. When you are at purpose and in flow, what are you absolutely happiest doing in what you're here to reveal to the world? There's a lovely storytelling allegory within that too, which is called The Diamonds Beneath Your Feet. If you listen to the podcast, that gets explained several times over actually in various episodes. Another time I can do a live where I do explain what the Diamonds Beneath Your Feet allegory is. And then finally, after we've talked about alchemy and gold, I award you with a cake. And rather than splatching it in your face, you get to put a cherry on the cake as a final sort of storytelling metaphor. And that's where you answer stuff like, what's a favourite inspirational quote that's always given you succor and pulled you towards your future? What notes, help or advice might you offer to a younger version of yourself? And stuff like, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given? And then finally, again, because of my acting background, we borrow from Shakespeare and all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players, borrowed from the 7 Ages of Man speech. I'll then ask you about legacy and how, when all is said and done, you would most like to be remembered. So as you've heard in the storytelling construct, there's a deliberate invitation and invocation to go as deep, as often as you like, wherever you like. So just to recap, it's a clearing, a tree, some alchemy, some gold, a couple of random squirrels, a cheeky bit of Shakespeare, and a cake. We're about 120 episodes into the podcast so far. This is a new, very exciting departure happening in 2 weeks from tonight. This is, as I say, you're listening to a world premiere of an experiment to broadcast live to YouTube and Facebook as I do this. There are other exciting things happening with the podcast as well in moving it towards being a live show, in that it's going to be part of the Slapstick Festival here in Bristol. I'm due to be interviewing Robin Ince live on stage using this sort of, these gadgets and bits of gizzardry as well. That's happening in February. We're also in talks at the moment with the Egg Theatre in Bath as well to tell the founder story of the story behind the story. The curator of the Egg, Kate Cross, will be coming into the Good Listening To clearing. I'm currently talking to the Central School of Speech and Drama and the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, both institutions at which I trained, firstly as a drama teacher, then as an actor, central teaching at Bristol Old Vic Theatre School as an actor, and I'm talking to the alumni departments to talk about amplifying the reputation of the school, but also getting some really nice juicy ears on seats through interviewing current and also old students, some of whom are rather famous. So yes, welcome to this inaugural broadcast. I'm going to stop very, very soon, but I just wanted to get on the open road of trying this out. And sincere thanks to Chris and Pete from spiralux.co.uk, who are the wonderful people that are helping bring this alive. And also thanks to Ollie McConnell, who's been wonderful in the one he's created the YouTube channel for me. There's also a wonderful man called Reg Starkey, who's been giving me advice from the get-go and been consummately encouraging at several really pivotal and energetic points as I've gone on the open road of curating the podcast in the way that I have, and it has become a real passion project. And I'd also like to sincerely thank Alec Lom, who's out there too. A really wonderful squad of people who are giving me help. There's also a Hollywood agent called Seamus Light, who's been very helpful as well, and somebody called Anne Wimbledon, who introduced me to Seamus Light. And Seamus Light, by the way, gave me Ross King as one of my previous guests. And Christopher Biggins doesn't know that I'm coming for him yet, but I am. Whilst I'm doing this, I'll just say one thing. When I first got going with the podcast, which is now about 18 months old, and as I say, it's about 120 episodes in, I've got a curated list of people that I really, really, really want to speak to. And at the top of my tree, if you like, in that regard, using that metaphor again, is Michael Palin. So just to say, the day that you can be on YouTube with me going live, when you notice that I'm talking to Michael Palin, we'll all know that I've definitely made it. And the exciting news is when I do the Slapstick Festival in February, that's on a day when Michael Palin is definitely in the building, whilst I'll be interviewing Robin Ince. And I think Rob Brydon on that evening is going to be interviewing Michael Palin on the stage of the Bristol Old Vic Theatre. Witter, ramble. Just look, I'd let my thinking unfold, but thank you for watching, if you are, this first inaugural Facebook, YouTube Live of the Good Listening To show, the story behind your story show. I've been Chris Grimes. Keep listening and good night.